Hello everyone, CE here, and in today's video I have come up with 6 easy tips for you to improve your diecast photography and for people to keep coming back to your Instagram for a eye-catching gallery. So I have had a couple of messages, people asking for tips or advice or just wondering how I do this or do that. So I figured I would make a video out of it, and I have broken this down into 6 steps or tips that I use regularly now when I capture my photos. Tip 1. Product placement. So in product placement, it's pretty much self-explanatory in this category. You want to make sure that you are placing your die-casts in an environment that makes sense. So if you are planning on shooting outside, make sure you get an idea of what kind of photo you would like to capture before you head outside. So let's say you grab a couple trucks that you would like to shoot for that day, and let's go to the park. Let's go to a place where you're going to have a wooded area or a dirt covered area or perhaps a rocky cover area. So if I go to the park and I know that I want to shoot some trucks or RVs or campers or whatever I have of that nature, I'm going to head to that part of the park where I can get a good scenic background that makes sense for that casting. When I'm shooting muscle cars or sports cars, I like to shoot on concrete surfaces, asphalt surfaces, wood surfaces. I like to have a cleaner background. I like to add more light into the background. You can also, when I'm shooting like muscle cars and sports cars, sometimes I go for more of an urban background, or incorporate more wood, more steel, more rust, something that will resemble like a city or an abandoned town, because beauty versus something that's old really sticks out to someone who's scrolling through your gallery. It's a good combination. With trucks, I like to add more water into the background. I like to add more trees into the background. I like to add more rocky surfaces into my background to give it more of a rural, like I've been out traveling and I'm out hitting, the mountaintops or the rocky tops. This, when someone's looking at your Instagram, this just makes sense. Tip 2, angles. Okay, so for angles, when you start paying attention to professional automotive photographers, you will notice that their pictures or their gallery, they tend to shoot low or at interesting angles, like from high above, or they zoom into a particular part of the vehicle, such as the grille, the wheels, or inside the vehicle, like the seats or the steering wheel. Now, you can apply this technique to your diecast photography, which is what I have done, and since doing that, I've had more people react to my photos. Now, because I've grown up around cars my whole life, I've had to get used to that technique as well as far as shooting the real life vehicles. But when I started to apply that technique to my Hot Wheels photos, my Hot Wheels photos started to really come alive, and I started to notice that I was improving not only my photos, but improving my creativity when doing so, if that makes sense, because then I was kind of fixated on the fact of how can I shoot this car at this angle, because this car is different from that one. Not all Hot Wheels photograph the same way, especially if you have like a Mustang that is more round versus like a boxy 83 Chevy Silverado or 70 Power Wagon. They all photograph differently. So when you start practicing with angles, you'll notice an improvement in your photography, because that is the professional techniques of a automotive photographer. Your photos will instantly start to look more appealing to the eye. Tip 3, lighting. So lighting is a big deal no matter what you're shooting, no matter what your subject is, whether it's portrait photography, automotive photography, toy photography. Lighting is key, and that's why I have added this to the list, because for one, this applies to all techniques of photography, and if you are just getting into photography, you should really start paying attention to how the lighting is hitting your diecast car. Now, I tell people to avoid shooting midday. You can shoot midday if you're, if it's an overcast day, or you're underneath a canopy, or you're in a shadowed area where you can get natural light, but you're not getting any harsh light. The problem with midday is that when the sun is, right there mid in the sky, the diecast cars tend to have the light bounce off of them, and you get really nasty sun flares. When you start editing in post, you notice that the lighting on your car makes the paint 2 or 3 different shades of color, when you know that car isn't multicolored, but when you're editing, blacks can look like blues, your purples can look like blues, so it really messes up the color of the vehicle. Also, if you have tampos you want to showcase on the vehicle, you have a nasty sun flare on that tampo, or you have a shadow on it, half the tampo is in shadow, half the tampo is in the light. It's really hard to edit that out in post, so I recommend always shooting the side that's getting the most light and balanced light. Sometimes you have to move the car around several times. You'll have to take your camera, get low, look through the lens, and see where the light is actually bouncing off the paint, because in some cases the premium line paint is better to shoot than the mainline paint, because the mainline paint, sometimes whatever's in that paint just bounces the light everywhere and your car just looks splotchy. So I've had to learn that shooting at certain times in the day, like the evening, early in the morning, or on an overcast day, I get some of the best lighting. Tip 4, environment diversity. So environment diversity is where when you go to an Instagram account and you see that this user's Instagram gallery, all their photos look alike. So perhaps this Instagram account isn't focusing on their photography, they're focusing on the diecast car itself. But in my opinion, I think that gets a little redundant, but to each their own. If you want to really branch off and improve your photography, you're going to need to add diversity into your account. So the best way to do that is to travel. Is hit up your local areas first, see what works for you, see what you're comfortable with. It can be kind of awkward in the beginning to shoot in a public setting because people are going to look at you and they are going to come up to you. When I was filming my park scenes, I had an old man walking a little dog come up to me and ask me what I was doing. So you got to start becoming comfortable with who you are and being comfortable with being seen out in public. But once you start finding your local areas and you find favorite little spots to shoot, then you can adapt from there. And then when you start traveling and get to shoot in places you've never been before, actually it becomes very fun to stumble upon a really cool area where you can get some really cool shots. Now, being diverse and shooting in different locations is going to improve your photography, because it's going to challenge you, because the lighting's going to be different. You can play with color contrast. You have the worlds at your hand, and you can pretty much control your environment the best way you can by deciding what kind of photo you would like to create. Tip 5, shooting to scale. So, shooting to scale. When you have found a place that you would like to start shooting, it is very important that you declutter the area. And so this is where shooting to scale takes place. There are many times when I find the spot that I want to shoot, I start shooting and I look at my photos and I realize there's something in my photo that is distracting or taking away from the Hot Wheels car, or it makes the Hot Wheels car look too much like a toy. So what I recommend is when you find, let's say you're shooting on some pea gravel or in a dirt area where, you know, the gravel itself is very, very small, and you're shooting, you take a couple pictures and you notice, oh, I have some leaves in the background that are distracting, you know, and or I have a twig or something, or I've had acorn shells or bugs in my photos. So when I take a couple pictures, I actually see what my lens is picking up, and you can take out what you need to declutter the photo. Anything that's going to give away the scale of the vehicle, or anything that's going to offset or unbalance your photo. There is this rule of thirds in photography that helps train the eye. Your Hot Wheels car should always be the star. It should always be your main subject, unless you're in an environment that has a beautiful sunset or sunrise or mountain view, and you really want to capture that and kind of make that your star. But for the most part, your diecast car should be your star. So that should be the first thing that people see. It shouldn't be anything, you know, like twigs, leaves, rocks, bugs, nothing to distract it, unless you want to capture that ladybug that's landed on your car. So just declutter, you know, take a couple pictures, and declutter what you see in your photo, because if you do decluttering first, you can spend there all day taking out things that may not be necessary, because you just need to take out the things that are going to be focused in the lens. Next tip is the tunnel vision. Now, tunnel vision is kind of considered a bad thing in most cases, but when it comes to diecast photography, it really comes in handy. Now, this one will take some practice, this one will take some getting used to, but if you're a natural at it, you'll start to train yourself naturally and you'll get into the zone. Now, what helps with tunnel vision, what makes this so important to diecast photography, is that because you're shooting small objects, you're doing macro photography, so you're capturing something close up that is small. So the world is a very big place. So trying to think small and look at a certain setting and thinking, oh, this is a little overwhelming, where am I going to shoot? Or you're thinking, I have nowhere to shoot. There's nowhere to shoot over here. Start looking at things that you're overlooking. I've shot in mailboxes. I have shot in drain pipes. I have shot on top of electrical boxes. I've shot in places where people would overlook to think to shoot. And the reason I shot in these locations is because I was pushing myself to think outside the box. What can I do to make a really cool photo that I haven't done already? And here comes my cat. My little Hot Wheels thief. Get over here. Get over here. YouTube debut. Woohoo! I threw myself off. So yeah, tunnel vision. So if you look up the definition of tunnel vision, it's basically you fixated on the subject close in front of you. And that's exactly what you have to do. You gotta block everything else out. Block out that road that's to your left or right. Block out that tree that's to the left or right. Block out those people who are walking around you or behind you. That takes some practice. So, but I am a believer of it, and it really has helped me, and has really helped me branch off, and helps me keep my photography diverse, and it keeps me focused. I get into the zone when I use my tunnel vision. Alright guys, so those are the 6 tips that I think will help improve your photography, because they definitely improved my photography, and I practice almost every day, and these are very important tips when it comes to shooting small scale diecast cars, and even 1/18th scale cars. You know, when I'm shooting a 1/18th scale car and having the real car in the background, these tips also apply for that. And I believe if you practice hard enough, you'll start seeing improvement in your own diecast photography. So I hope you found these tips useful. I hope maybe I introduced some tips to you that you perhaps haven't thought of before. And I hope all my Hot Wheels buddies, guys, gals, whoever you are, you're having a great day, and happy hunting to you. I'll see you soon. Peace.